Well, it's time for another exciting trip back in time, back to when I was doing crazy things in my garage, well before I was doing toy reviews on YouTube. And we'll take a look at a fairly elaborate and over-the-top little scene I was doing for a crazy little film, which went absolutely nowhere. Like anything with models and film, you've got to build things from scratch, and I was trying to be as clever as I could and do really simple things which look good. Folding up cardboard to look like mountains works for me. Buying kitty litter and decorating it as the ground works for me as well. And hopefully this time around on this crazy little film, I had a far better way of controlling the model trains because they all complied to HOOO rails. The other thing I noticed here is I had blue gel on the lights, and that was because I was trying to balance out the lights to be more like sunlight. But this scene depicts one of many scenes where we see things getting destroyed and blown up. And in this very simple little scene that I was trying to put together, it's quite simple. The helicopter has some major engine troubles and crashes into the windmill, narrowly missing one of the main engines on the rail yards. And I like to work very simply, so what I did was I hooked up my air gun to power the rotor blades on the helicopter, and I also had a puppeteering wire out the back of the helicopter so I can control where it goes. I actually used the same puppeteering method in Mad Bomber 1 when you saw the helicopter taking off. But this helicopter was rigged with a special area where I could put a smoke charge and make it look like it was having some major troubles. The other interesting note is, look at my table. That's the same table I use today to do my toy reviews. Back then it was just a workbench for making silly videos down in the garage. By using a Manfrotto arm, or some people call them magic arms, I was able to link the puppeteering rod to my camera, and this gave me a fantastic point of view when I was shooting scenes with the helicopter. And as I've said over and over so many times, I can't stress how important and fantastic those Manfrotto arms are. I use them all the time. What's really surprising is you rarely ever see them in camera shops. Well, remember I spoke earlier about it being easier to move the model trains because I was conforming to HOOO rail lines? Well, little did I know I was up against some other gremlins in the garage. To paint the bigger picture to the story here, I've got some old Thomas & Friends Erdl trains, and I've put some HOOO wheels on them so I could run them on HOOO rails. These rails were electrified, and I had another engine which I can't name because I know nothing about trains, doing the pushing, pulling or whatever of the Erdl train. Remember I spoke about using kitty litter as a dressing? In the kitty litter was also some oxide to darken it down. This became my nemesis, because what I found was the tracks were being contaminated with the kitty litter and the oxide. My electrified train couldn't stand the build-up of this gunk on the rails, which built up also on the wheels. I dare say people who do real model railways would know all about this because they've probably encountered this before, or because they're in the know, they know not to do the things that I've just done. What I should have done was made a wash of PVA glue and basically adhered all of the gravel down to the set. This would trap all the fine dust and stop it from raising up and getting onto the rails. But I wasn't that smart back then. Just to get this shot of the train running past the windmill took so many takes it's not funny. And there was all sorts of problems. If the train didn't make it all the way without being jerky or starting and stopping, well then maybe I'd have another problem where the windmill would stop working as well. Trying to be oh so clever, I had a smoke effect coming from that train which looks very much like Gordon. And that was only another thing that would go wrong when I was attempting a take. One big problem for me was I was starting to steer clear of a winning formula that you should adhere to if you're making little films, and that's the KISS theory. And the KISS stands for Keep It Simple Stupid. Considering I was only trying to get a couple of second grabs of the train going down the rails to establish the fact that the helicopter was looking at the train and the helicopter was about to crash, I was making this job oh so complex. I was turning what could have been a very simple scene into an absolute nightmare. All I was trying to do was adhere to one of my favourite sayings is, the devil is in the detail. Well, trying to chase the detail was letting the devil have a bash at me. And yes, do you remember why I video things upside down? That's because the way that my camera is structured, the only way to get my lens down nice and low and level with the train is to have it inverted. And in these ingenious days of computerized video editing, it's so easy to flip around the image and have it the right way up. Once you pull off that perspective, your little train set really starts to come alive on camera. because part of the secret storyline was, one by one, mysterious accidents and explosions were happening all around the rail lines. Of course, the person doing all this destruction was the Mad Bomber. And of course, nobody knew who this person was, as this person worked in a very mysterious way. In the storyline, there are a number of strange forces going on, as some engines were now being run on LPG power, and there were lots of diesels being introduced into the rail yards. These diesels were all identical and lacked any sort of character. With the steamies reinventing themselves to run on gas, the diesels felt they were under threat. So the Mad Bomber had a huge task to send a clear message to the people running the railways. As the story evolves, basically nobody can be trusted. You know, it's funny looking back on these tapes, and I saw a slate that I did and it said 2008, so it was actually a long time ago when I was doing all this. And even to get this very simple shot of the helicopter on fire falling towards a windmill took many takes. I'm certainly starting to relive the pain that I felt when I was trying to pull this off. Next up, I'll show you the sequence of special effects shots of the helicopter crash, and if they look okay, I might do some slow motion on some of these shots. The stuff I'm lighting there is called smokestack. It's something I make myself and it's really simple, but because this is YouTube, I can't tell you how to make it. Sadly on YouTube, the beautiful art of pyrotechnics is a no-no. These next two explosions may look like Dodgy Brothers special effects, but their purpose is more to do with editing. It allows me an edit point so I can cut in and see the helicopter back on the ground. Quite often I use that big flash of pyrotechnic charge as an edit point to change to another camera view. You know what's really sad is the very fine art form and secret art form of miniature pyrotechnics is being lost. And it's being lost because this style of filmmaking is rarely ever used these days. It's one of the few things that I'm actually qualified in life for. If you're wondering where I got my qualifications, it was from the back of a breakfast cereal box. And no, they weren't Cocoa Pops. One real big disappointment about YouTube is that I can't bring my knowledge to the YouTube audience. Unless you're producing G-rated stuff, I've got a funny feeling YouTube wants nothing to do with you. And of course, after a horrid explosion and crash, there's an aftermath, and there were a couple of engines who came in to the rescue. And you know what, when I look at all this, I say to myself, there is no way I would ever produce anything like this for YouTube today. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Today's YouTube has completely lost the vitality and edge that it had in those early years. It's a site which is now full of many contradictions. You'll see some partners get away with what seems like blue murder, while others never get their hands on the keys to the kingdom. Sadly, I can now report I've had YouTube users lay death threats against my children. I certainly report these channels and nothing seems to happen to them. In my books, if you've got YouTube users threatening others with death threats or death threats to their family, they should be banned immediately. The more I witness uncontrollable behaviour from users here, the more I say to myself, I don't think I want to be involved anymore. I'm absolutely certain that YouTube was not like this back in 2007 when I started. It seems the cover of freedom of speech plays out and assists those who are out to cause trouble on these networks. Considering what I've had to put up with during 2013, I'm really fearful if I hang around any longer, I won't be able to take much more of it. So maybe in the end, the hate trolls get their way. And that's a very sad day for YouTube. If you want to see more explosion and fire?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Absolutely sure?
Yeah, and he's having an accident.
Is it a bad accident?
Yeah. I want to see more. I want to see more, Daddy. More.